Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, September 5th, 2021, and today I'm going to be talking about my most recent Senate election projection that I made on the 3rd of September, in which I predicted that the Republican Party would pick up 2 Senate seats in 2022, effectively flipping the Senate 52 Republicans to 48 Democrats, and just provide a little bit more context about some of the more individual races that I've seen a lot of comments about, a lot of disagreements from you guys that I think just deserves a little bit more clarity as to how I actually reached this point. So if we go ahead and see, the time period in which we will reach the Senate elections is 428 days. So obviously, this projection is subject to change. The American public will likely not be the same as they are today in a year and a half from now when they actually vote on that ballot. In 428 days, that's effectively when the last bit of campaigning will end, when the Democratic Party and the Republican Party will be in that position where that evening we will know who is controlling the Senate after that term. So essentially, in this most recent projection, this was a combination of Joe Biden falling out of favor, new generic ballot numbers, and everything that's happening across the nation. So it's actually not too bad given the circumstances for the Democratic Party. If anything, they could have been in the negative in Arizona and Nevada, which probably would have been more on the extreme end, and that's why I didn't put it that way, but those are well within opportunities for the GOP, as I have rated them both tilt for the Democratic Party. So at this point in time, what do I see? What are the most contentious states? Why was there backlash in the first place about some of these projections? Well, the races that I projected were, of course, the closest ones that we've seen so far: Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada. These are states that are hotly contested, New Hampshire, that a lot of people have been focusing a lot of their attention on, and it deserves a lot of attention for very good reason. These states will be crucial for either political party in terms of controlling or not the United States Senate after 2022. So, as we know so far, Joe Biden's approval ratings have begun to plunge. Over the past time that I've made my most previous projection before this one was on August 7th, 2021. Then I predicted the Democratic Party would win 52 Senate seats with the Republicans at 48. Obviously, a flip-flop is nothing that the Democratic Party would see, but it makes sense given the circumstances of today. You see, on the 7th of August, Joe Biden was approved of by +7 net nationwide. 50%, more than 50% of the nation approved of him. The majority of the country was on his side. Today, just 46% of the country is on his side, and 48% say they disapprove of his job as President of the United States. It's very clear that the sentiment here has turned on Joe Biden, in around 11-point deficit relative to where he was back on August 7th. So obviously, the map was going to change. But we'll start out by characterizing the states that voted for the Republican Party that I otherwise had in the Democratic Party in my previous projection prior to the one I just released. The first state we will talk about is the state of Georgia. Now, this was actually a pretty significant change. It went from tilt Democrat to lean Republican. In fact, at one point, it was lean Democrat in July of 2021. And the reason why I have now moved it over is because of the circumstances surrounding President Joe Biden. If you take a look at the 2020 presidential election results, you will see that in Georgia, this state was decided by 0.2%. If you take a look at Joe Biden's approval rating in the past, keep in mind, I don't have the numbers in front of you. You can check Real Clear Politics yourself. You will see that the favorability rating, which works a lot like the approval rating during the time in which a candidate is running for office and that is not actually in office, it was +7 nationwide, +7 points required in order for Joe Biden to win in the state of Georgia by 0.2%. In addition, you take a look at the state of Georgia compared to the national popular vote, about a 4-point rightward shift compared to the rest of the nation. And if you take a look at the generic ballot right now, Democrats are not up 4 points. One poll showed them up by 7, but the other one shows them down 2, tied in the other, and up to the overall average here is around a 2-point lead for the Democratic Party. In 2020, they won the popular vote in the presidential election by 5 points. So looking at the state of Georgia as it stands today, I do think that the Republican Party would win the state. Herschel Walker may be a weak candidate, but he still has the R by his name. That will be enough in many cases to win over a lot of the electorate. Georgia also barely voted for Biden in the first place. As I've just been highlighting, that cannot be understated. That needs to be recognized. Though Raphael Warnock won by 2.4%, which is why I've had it in the lean Democratic column, he has that advantage. Herschel Walker will be able to utilize the energy that is on the Republican Party side now, undoubtedly on their side. There is no questioning that, in my opinion, that they will be able to utilize that to win the state of Georgia by a lean margin. The suburbs are also key, and so is minority turnout. You take a look at Fulton County and other counties around the state of Georgia, in specifically the Atlanta metro area, 67% of the state lives in this exact circle that I'm circling around. So it really matters in terms of voter sentiment, in terms of the enthusiasm, and right now, Democrats simply don't have that. Because Joe Biden is falling out of favor on coronavirus, on the economy, on Afghanistan, the American public is turning away from him, and Democrats aren't nearly as enthused as they were a month ago. That's another reason why I put Georgia in the lean Republican column. And Georgia was also very solid for the GOP up until 2020. So it's only recently gotten way more competitive and way more pro-democratic, which means that this just honestly isn't the best position for the Democrats at this point in time. The next state that I characterized for the Republican Party that I previously had in the Democratic column is the state of Wisconsin. You see, the incumbency factor here, I think, will be able to add some type of boost for Ron Johnson if he is to run. But even if he isn't to run, I still expect the state to vote the same way of my most recent projection. It was severely close in 2020, despite all of the polling data indicating that Wisconsin was going to be a 7-8 point margin of victory for Joe Biden. The difference between Georgia and Wisconsin is that Wisconsin was expected to be very solid for Biden. Georgia was never expected to be solid for Biden. Wisconsin was one of the closest states in the 2020 election, 0.6%. It was narrower than Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, Florida. This state was amongst the closest, one of the closest states in the 2020 presidential election, and that cannot be understated. Minorities are also leaving a lot of the major cities here, moving down into the Sun Belt, which helps Democrats in states such as Arizona, Georgia, Texas, but does prove to be detrimental to them, especially in the Rust Belt, where you are starting to see minority voters move out in large amounts. Not necessarily the white flight that we saw years ago. Not the same thing going on. And also, Donald Trump practically revolutionized the Rust Belt for the Republican Party. That is essentially what's going on in the state of Wisconsin, is that this is a state in which you cannot see Republicans doing well without some type of Trump rhetoric. And I think that, honestly, the Republican Party there is going to find someone who embodies President Trump. And while he was rejected on the presidential level in 2020, if the same electorate is not turning out to vote, meaning the same people who were maybe enthusiastic to vote for Biden, maybe more enthusiastic to vote out Donald Trump, if they are not getting out to vote, well, then Republicans will be able to utilize that Trump energy and turn out enough of the rural base and enough of the regular Trump base in the suburbs in order to win the election. So Trump revolutionized the Rust Belt, and that will certainly happen again in 2022, given the way that Joe Biden is being received right now, because even if voters may not have liked Trump in 2020, if they're not happy with Biden, they're going to resort to their next option, even if it is a President Trump type of nominee. The next state that I characterized as Republican is the state of Pennsylvania. This is a state in which the Republican Party also has the incumbency. It's another thing that they will have some type of impact, just having the incumbency factor there. Pat Toomey may not necessarily be popular amongst the Trump wing of the Republican Party. I don't think that he should be regarded as such, but I do think that there is that idea there that if people are wanting someone who they've known for a long time or trust the party enough that they have voted for Pat Toomey in the past, if they have voted for Pat Toomey in the past, even if they may not be staunch Republicans or independents that lean towards the left, they're going to want to check and balance on President Biden, and they will get that through a Republican. If they are not happy with the current status of the government, if they are not happy with the current status of Joe Biden and the Democrats in office, they will be inclined to vote for a Republican. Another state that was also revolutionized by Donald Trump. Again, Pennsylvania is a state that the Democratic Party heavily invested in and still only won by 1.2%. Another state that really should have gone to them by a way more solid margin that they ended up not getting, that they otherwise should have gotten. So moving on to the next state, you have the state of New Hampshire. This is a state where Chris Sununu seems to be poised to run for United States Senate. And I've characterized these four states as GOP states that previously were in the Democratic column. Now, New Hampshire, if Chris Sununu runs, I think at this point in time, I would say Chris Sununu will win that election. If he is to announce, the rating is moving over one step to the right. But you can't always say that that's an absolute certainty. Once Chris Sununu starts to take nationalistic type of positions for the GOP's sake, he might not be as favored as he is now. He's still a Republican at heart, but he's a liberal one in the state of New Hampshire. If he has to take away the liberalism part of it to inspire the Trump base to turn out for him, he's going to push away Democratic voters that otherwise would have backed him. And you also can't ignore, though, the Democratic Party failing to continue to hold the state house in the state of New Hampshire. Republicans now have a trifecta in the state of New Hampshire when it comes down to the statewide level, despite voting for Joe Biden by 7 points, having 2 Democratic senators. Yet for some reason, Democrats really faltered on the down ballot aspect when it came down to local races. But essentially, looking at New Hampshire, it's always a swing state, and I really do think that it will be swinging back and forth. And as of right now, the GOP does have that upper hand, especially if Chris Sununu decides to run. The final 2 states that changed characterizations just slightly, though, not enough to go into the Republican column, but enough to shift over further to the right. Actually, 3 states: North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada. Now, these states can practically be grouped together. A lot of it has to do with decreased minority excitement. A lot of it has to do with with the fact that the Republican Party will be heavily targeting these states. They won they won North Carolina in the 2020 presidential election. They won North Carolina in the 2016 Senate election. They lost New Hampshire. They did lose New Hampshire. They lost Nevada, and they were able to win the state of Arizona. But what I see here is that the Democratic Party is going to lose support in Nevada, Arizona, and North Carolina. North Carolina, which already was in the lean Republican column, I think, in my most recent projection prior to this one, that I said, Republicans will probably win this race. They will win it by a margin of 1 to 5%. Now I think that the Republican Party will do better just because North Carolina already didn't vote for Joe Biden, with him being up 7 points nationwide. They voted against him by less than 2 points. I can't only imagine, what the margin would be for a Republican, especially in an off year where Democrats won't be enthused to get out and vote, and the approval rating of Joe Biden has dissipated. So looking at North Carolina, I think the same applies to Arizona and Nevada. I just think that the GOP just has really bad choices here for nominees, especially in Arizona. I really don't think that's a race that is going to be easy for the GOP to field a candidate against Mark Kelly. In addition, Nevada, Catherine Cortez Masto, she's running against likely to be Adam Laxalt. While he is someone who is a former statewide official, he's the state attorney general, he still also has a little bit of baggage with him that was able to prevent him from winning the governorship in 2018. So you typically don't rerun candidates, but sometimes you can try. But that's why right now I would say that, Nevada, Arizona, Nevada and Arizona are two states that I would keep in the Democratic column. North Carolina, I moved over. Keep in the Democratic column. North Carolina, I moved over further into the Republican column. But all around, overall, what is happening right now, the generic ballot and the national environment in itself is not good for the Democratic Party. You can see what has happened even in years where they win the generic ballot by 9 points. Sometimes they still lose seats. In the Senate elections in 2016, though, despite them losing on practically every level, Democrats are able to pick up 2 Senate seats and 6 House seats. Now, the 6 House seats are not really that impressive, but the 2 Senate seats were. In the states that they were in, Illinois probably not so much, but New Hampshire, yeah. New Hampshire was won by 0.1%, but that also is a contributor as to why I think that it will still be difficult for the Democrats to hold on to it, especially considering Joe Biden's approval rating right now. And that brings me into my second point, the way that Joe Biden is being approved of, or not so much at all. You see, from the beginning of his presidency, there was a point in time where he was approved of by plus 20 nationwide, and that is reduced to -3. That is a 23-point swing from the beginning of the presidency, and that cannot be understated. That is a serious, very serious dip in overall approval and needs to be recognized, because Democrats need to understand that at some point in time, once Joe Biden falls out of public favor, they will also fall out of public favor. I understand there are individual circumstances where Democrats can still win, despite Joe Biden being unpopular. For instance, in Virginia, it doesn't look like this is negatively impacting Terry McAuliffe in a heavy fashion at all. In the state of California, it looks like Gavin Newsom is actually going to rebound and regain support, even though Joe Biden is much more unpopular now than he was before. But if you take a look at some of the polling data, not even on the generic ballot, but other polls that you can check out yourself, Republicans are actually starting to surge, in a sense, up higher and higher when it comes down to the way that they're being viewed by the American public. And I think a lot of it is directly to do with Joe Biden, which I think also can explain why these states have shifted towards the right and why I expect right now the GOP to win control of the Senate after 2022. Now, many of these states are also negligible. I want you guys to realize that as well. Many of these states could go back and forth. New Hampshire, Arizona, Nevada, these are all states decided, I think, that will be decided by less than 1%, which means that really a few ads could change this. A rally could change this. Very minuscule things could ultimately result in a very different Senate election result. The same also applies to Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, all states that are characterized as lean for the Republican Party that can change party declaration over the next couple of months or practically overnight. I mean, you've seen, and the title of this video indicates, that over a month, it went from Democratic control to Republican control, effectively switching 4 seats. And by the next month, potentially speaking, Democrats could be back in a position where they will hold on and maintain control of the United States Senate. But it really all depends on the national environment. This was the first time, and yesterday was the first time, I ever projected that the Republican Party was going to win control. 52 actually was the highest point I put the Democratic Party at, and it lasted from June through August. And then September hit. Once September hit, Joe Biden was at a very very low approval rating, something that he would not be able to give the Democrats for them to survive on Election Day in 2022, and would have hindered them very greatly. So all around, all of the things here that are packing up and piling up on the Democratic Party, they need to acknowledge and they need to go out and ramp up some energy and start to combat some of these things. The same thing they did with the DNC, with Joe Biden's image, completely changed it. They need to do that again on a very national and individual scale when it comes down to some of these individual House and Senate races where a lot of these Democrats are seeing a lot of negative effects because of the way that the American public views Joe Biden. And rather than, I would say that Joe Biden above all trumps all when it comes down to the way that the voters decide to vote based off an individual candidate or not. Joe Biden definitely comes to mind first. But Democrats can also recover. I mean, this is not to say that this is a done deal, that the Senate is absolutely out of their control, because they maintained control and they were projected to maintain control for months at a time. Democrats just need to resurge Joe Biden's popularity when it comes down to the economy, Afghanistan. Those approval ratings need to start going up. And then also, the events of the American public, the events of our political system need to change. Things such as Afghanistan probably will not be the major headlines in 2 months from now. Something will come up, and that will benefit Joe Biden by allowing voters to forget certain instances of his administration the same way they did for President Trump, President Obama, President Bush, etc. And COVID-19 also needs to go down. That is something that the Democratic Party campaigned on, that they would handle it differently. And while they did roll out vaccines in a very fortunate way, Democrats and Republicans, I will also say that right now, people are not happy with mask mandates. People are not happy with social distancing. They're not happy with cancellations of things, even if they're vaccinated. I mean, these are people who trust the science, yes, enough to get the vaccine, but also are upset because they're saying, we played our part for over a year, we masked up, we got the vaccine, we double masked, we didn't travel, etc., 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 and yet these mandates are still being put on us to protect other people. That's the thing that starts to rise, and people say, if Biden truly was to handle this pandemic, he would have handled it for both the unvaccinated and the vaccinated. I don't think many people could have said the Delta variant was at the top of their mind before, but it absolutely will be. But also, if Democrats are to try to recover, because their highest level of approval used to be amongst COVID-19 and still is, but isn't improved of by nearly the same amount. I mean, 2 months ago it was plus 30, today it's plus 10. You have seen a dramatic reduction in support when it comes down to the coronavirus. So a lot of it has to do with events changing, Afghanistan, the economy, and COVID-19, all correlating around Joe Biden, which can all dramatically change the outcome of these future Senate elections, and has changed it dramatically over the past month. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.